Good evening. From the Gail Lemron Auditorium on the campus of Embry-Riddle, welcome to the Embry-Riddle Speaker Series event. I'm Mark Bernier, moderator for tonight's interview. A very rare opportunity to talk with a genuine American hero. You will hear his story as told through a book that he wrote called The Streets of Mogadishu. It's an example of great leadership and sacrifice in leading from the front, an important aspect of the theory behind our guest and leadership. We'll be taking your questions, and we'll go through the whole military procedure and what was the inspiration for the movie and the book, Black Hawk Down. It is with a great privilege and pleasure, and thanks for his service to America, we present our guest tonight, Colonel Danny McKnight. Colonel, thank you for spending the day with us here at Embry-Riddle. It's good to see you, sir, and thank you for telling your story this morning. It was quite inspiring.
Thank you.
You know, you've done a number of interviews over the years. You've made appearances all throughout the state and the country, and we're going to get to where you travel to remember those who have fallen. And I guess the best way to start is you believe in leading from the front because you were injured in Mogadishu. You were shot twice, I believe. And people said, why were you up front? And your theory is?
I don't know how to lead from the rear. I really don't. And I learned that from some really good people along the way that were my mentors, in all honesty. They might not have said it specifically, but I just learned by watching. And sometimes if you keep your eyes and ears open and your mouth shut, you can learn a whole lot.
You, a local boy, too, you played sports. You're in Brevard County. You're active as a citizen there as well, with a distinguished military career as a ranger. And in reading the book, I was astonished by a couple of things. How an initial command, an initial call to hit Mogadishu was actually called off. You were all ready to go, and then it was called off, presumably by President Clinton? Is that what happened?
Last time I checked, he was the commander-in-chief, so you have to put it on your shoulders if you're the boss, you know. So I'm sure he just was the one that made the final decision, but I think he was the primary one because a military person would have never made that decision.
In that fateful battle now 25 years ago, it appears that they actually cut the troop number down to 450 under your command. Am I correct? It was supposed to be 550?
We had 551 that we had trained with from August the 12th to August the 22nd. General Garrison said, you guys are ready to go on August the 22nd. He said, take some time now to rest, eat, get ready to go. Later that night, General Garrison called the leaders together and said, okay, there's been some changes. And the changes were this: Task Force Ranger's mission has been called off. That's all we were told.
Wow.
I go back to Fort Bliss where I was at with my whole battalion training for just an exercise. And he said it was called off. So we go back there. And the Delta guys, they stay there because that's their home where we were at. And the aviators, they always stayed for a couple of days because they like to get a lot of sleep or something. I don't know, you know. But we go back to Fort Bliss, Texas, 10 hours after we're back at Fort Bliss, Texas. My boss tells me the mission is back on.
Wow.
10 hours.
What does this do to you and to the platoon, to all of the battalion mentally? You're on, you're off, you're on.
With the younger guys, it was okay because they were excited because now they get to go. If you're a little older, like some of us here, you would say, okay, there must be a reason for this. And I think everybody adjusted to it very quickly because we knew we were well trained. General Garrison had done it perfectly with what he wanted us to do. And so I think we were ready, but it did bother us a lot. And then when we went back is when some other things changed.
How many in our audience have either read or watched the movie Black Hawk Down? So you know where we're going with this. You were shot twice. Tom Sizemore plays you in the movie, am I correct?
Yes.
The rolling of the eyes. Was that accurate? Because in the movie they say you were shot in the neck and the shoulder. Was that the arm? Mm-hmm. Was that accurate?
Yeah, that was accurate.
And there was a driver driving the vehicle, he couldn't see for all the blood in his face, and you just said, go straight, and finally he said, and we can't use the words because the language is a little more salty than families are going to want to hear later on the broadcast. He said he couldn't see blank, and at that point, what happens?
Well, my driver was not shot.
Oh.
The one they're portraying, and I think they have to combine things sometimes. So we did have a kid that got shot just like that, and they just, I guess, put him in the vehicle that I was in.
More dramatic effect?
I think so. My driver drove so well that when we did get back and everything, and the next day we went out and looked at my vehicle, and I asked Ranger Horowski, was his name, and I said, Ranger Horowski, what do you think of our vehicle? He said, boy, sir, it's really messed up. I said, yeah. He says, what do you think of my side? He says, sir, you got a lot of bullet holes in that windshield in front of you. I said, yeah, look at your side. There was no rounds. Never hit his side. You know why? They knew I was the guy they needed to take out, because the right seat is where your leader should be. And so I told him that. I said, I don't know how you drove the vehicle that well to dodge bullets, but okay. So be it. Great kid. He retired from the military as well. So,
Colonel, most often does the commander ride in the back? Would a commander be in the back? You were up front. How often do most of your colleagues?
I don't really know how to answer that one, because I really never focused on what somebody else might be doing. And I did it because I really and truly only know how to lead from the front. And I learned it from a great general officer who turned 93 a week ago today. And he is the father of Best Ranger competition that takes place at Fort Benning, Georgia. And his name is General David E. Grange, Jr., and that's what Best Ranger's named after. I was his aide for 18 months, 9 in Korea and 9 back at Fort Benning when he left Korea. I learned so much from him as a young captain, and it had an impact on me for the rest of my career. So sometimes you have to be lucky.
Was he the most influential person in your life professionally?
Without a doubt, without a doubt. I called him on Monday because it's our birthday. Mine and his are the same day. And
oh, wow.
He had a tremendous impact on me, and I'm sure there's a lot of others that he did too. But I would have never, ever reached the level of where I got and to lead in combat other than getting it from him.
You got the Purple Heart, a number of tabs and badges with this. When you are shot, what happens to you physically after that?
When I got shot there in the vehicle, I did have to tell Ranger Horowski. He said, "Sir, do you want me to stop?" No, you don't stop. You keep going. I'm going to be okay. And it didn't really, impact me out there. And it's sort of right what they showed in the movie that Tom Sizemore's getting the doctors working on him. Well, when I got back there and I looked at everybody that was wounded, and I had a lot of guys wounded, and the doctor came over to me, Doc Adams of the 160th, and he said, "Sir, I need to take care of you." I says, "Doc, when I see everybody else out here is taken care of, then you can touch me, but don't touch me before." It wasn't a threat, but I think he took it that way.
Colonel, in the book, you talk about the reduction, to go back to the number. Once you knew that it was going from 550 to 450 to go on this mission, what was going through your mind? Like, we're never going to pull this off? Or were you saying it's going to be a little tougher, but we're going to pull it off? Did you know at that point what you were going to be coming up upon? Because your description is they put rocks, they put barriers around to stop you guys from coming in. Take us through that.
And burning black tires.
Burning black tires?
Everywhere, yeah. I knew that, I had to give up 45 of my guys. That was part of what was taken away. I still had a full infantry company, okay? So I'm okay with that. But it just meant that we're going to have to adjust a little bit here and there to make sure that we've got enough people in all the right vehicles doing the right thing. And I still knew we could pull it off. And the Delta guys, they didn't lose anybody, and that's should have been that way. We lost some aviators because they cut the helicopters down too in terms of number of helicopters. Because you always want every helicopter that's going to be in the fight, but you also like to have 2 or 3 or 4 that are capable if one of those gets shot down. And we didn't have any extras, none.
And as you said this morning at the Veterans Appreciation Day ceremonies, the Rangers were there to fortify the others.
That's what we do.
6 of your men died.
Yes.
And each year, I think I heard you say this correctly, you visit their grave sites.
Not each year. I do it every 5 years. Started in 1993, of course, when they were all buried. And every 5 years since then, I have done that. So 93 to 98 to 03, etc. And this is 18.
This is the 25th anniversary, and there's going to be a gathering this year?
We're going to have one at Fort Bragg, 2 or 3 days there. We've done it one time before. We did it in Dallas, Texas, 5 years ago on the 20th anniversary. And we had a great host, a guy by the name of H. Ross Perot.
Wow.
He was the one that funded it and took care of everything. Yep. And that day when we went to his ranch and we went in his barn, I've seen barns, I've never seen one quite like that one. And he was the first person when we walked in to shake, that you shook his hand. Great man, and I always like to remind people how great he was and how much he helped us.
And the 6 that died are not all in Arlington. I mean, you go to Rehoboth, Massachusetts, Arlington. Take us through the places you go to.
One year we start in Rehoboth and end up in El Paso. So in Rehoboth, Massachusetts is where Corporal James Cavaco is buried. And then from there I go to Vineland, New Jersey. Sergeant Dominic Pila is buried there. And the Pilas and I have always maintained a very, very close relationship. I've never missed talking to Ben Pila on October the 3rd of any year. And so we go there, and Ben is Italian, so I always understand that if I come to Vineland and I don't stop at his house, he'll shoot me, so, and I trust him. But it's a great family he has and everything. I'll tell you one little important thing about that. Sergeant Pila was a E4, a specialist, when we went to Somalia. He was one that got promoted over there early. Within the first week we were there, we had some promotions that had to take place. And Sergeant Pila came to me and said, sir, he says, would you mind if I made a call back to my dad? Because we did have the capability. We didn't do it much. Very special if it happened. And I said, why do you want to call? He says, because I'm a sergeant. My dad was a specialist E4. I outrank him now. So I let him make the call. So Ben Pila and I are very close. At Arlington, I have Sergeant Casey Joyce and Ranger Richard Kowalewski. Sergeant Casey Joyce was the one that was shot in the back. Richard Kowalewski was the one that was driving the truck that got hit by an RPG. And they're there, but they're not side by side. There's another headstone in between. And it's Master Sergeant Grizz Martin of Delta Force that was killed over there. And people say, well, why didn't you put your guys beside each other, though? They said because it was done very importantly to show Rangers support the Delta Force guy. It was done intentionally. And then I go to Fort Benning, Georgia, and Corporal Jamie Smith is buried there. He was the last one killed that day of mine. And then I go to Fort Bliss, Texas, at National Cemetery there in El Paso, and Sergeant Lorenzo Rees is buried there. So I go one way, 5 years later, I go the other way, but if I'm even close to them, Linda would tell you, yeah, I know we're going, because that's what we do.
And you refer to them as your kids.
My kids, always.
I want to go back. Before Mogadishu, you were in Panama. Tell us about that. What happened?
Panama, in all honesty, you look at it, it was pretty easy, We knew what we had to do. We were going after get one guy. And we had a lot of force to do it with. And it wasn't just us, but we were the additional force that went in.
Who were you after?
Manuel Noriega. That was Noriega that we got out of there. But my battalion, and I was not battalion commander then, I was a battalion executive officer for 3rd Ranger Battalion. And we jumped that night at 1:03 in the morning from 500 feet, which when you jump at 500 feet, you really are hoping your chute opens because you do not have time, and many people in here know that I've jumped as well. If 500 feet, you are not going to be able to deploy that little reserve fast enough. And we lost 2 out of 3rd Battalion, 2 out of 2nd Battalion, and 2 out of 1st Battalion that died during that operation. But it was a tremendous success, really.
Were they hopelessly outnumbered? I mean, was it like a ragtag group around Noriega, or were they a well-oiled machine?
He had a well-oiled machine around him. But for instance, with the airfield we jumped, that was easy. That was like taking candy from a baby. That wasn't a problem.
So back to Somalia, and we see the fighting in the streets in the movie and in the video, which is pretty gruesome. Is that accurate? I mean, were they that intense? These people don't look like they're really trained military. They look like a bunch of people with machine guns.
That's what they were. They were totally untrained. I mean, when you see black smoke, and that's how they tell you to come, wherever you see black smoke, they're not a real military, but they had enough weapons, okay? And especially RPGs, and that really bothered us. But we couldn't figure out where the RPGs were coming, how they were getting them, and we finally figured it out because there were checkpoints around Mogadishu that were supposed to be guarded by UN soldiers. And I'll go ahead and give you my take on the UN soldiers. They're worthless, okay? I mean, they really are. They did nothing for us.
No, we were there, then we leave, they come in, they get overtaken, we go back? Is that how it worked? We were there. The UN soldiers, we succeed them, correct?
To see who? I'm sorry, I missed that.
We succeed UN soldiers that are in Somalia because they did nothing.
Nothing. They did.
They're supposed to be peacekeeping? No. I mean, what's their function?
Well, our goal was one thing: Mohammed Faradid. We knew if Mohammed Faradid, if we could take him out, they would fall. Their leadership would fall apart. In the movie, it shows capture of a guy in a vehicle. That was Osman Otto. He was the money guy, and he was the #1 person next to Adid. So we got him within the first 10 days we were there. That was a big deal. And he spoke English better than I do. I mean, he had tremendous, he was taught in the United States.
Really?
Yeah. But he was a brilliant guy, and he spoke perfect English, without a doubt. I mean, I got some kids from Texas that don't speak English as good as he does, okay? but he was the #1, and that day, on October 3rd, we got 2 more. He only had 5 key people. We had 3 of the top 5.
The intelligence report indicated that when you went in, it was going to be supposedly just a couple of hours, maybe tops, right? But it ended up being at least a 15-hour firefight. Am I correct?
I think it was somewhere around 15, 18.
After a while, it's all blurry. Is that how it works?
Yeah. But yeah, we thought we could get in and out pretty quick. And we were doing that until a helicopter got shot down, the first one. That changed everything. The first helicopter went down, we knew we had a problem. And we were fortunate to be able to get people to that helicopter, because if we hadn't got there before the Somalis did, none of those guys would have survived. The pilot and the co-pilot died on crash, Cliff Walcott and Donovan Briley. But the 2 crew chiefs in there both survived, and 2 PJs came over out of the one helicopter to help, Scotty Fales and Tim Wilkinson. Scotty Fales wasn't much help because just before he got to the helicopter, he got shot. So now it's just Tim Wilkinson. There was a guy in that by the name of Dan Bush. And I think the movie portrays it pretty well, showing Dan Bush leaned up against the helicopter out there shooting and defending people.
Yes.
Dan Bush is a hero to me. I believe Dan Bush should have been a recipient of the Medal of Honor, because what he did kept those people that did survive in that helicopter alive. I was doing a radio show after I retired, just but maybe a month after I retired, with down in Orlando. It was a connection from Snellville, Georgia. That's where I lived, okay? It's really there. I was there in the townhouse. I retired, and they hooked us up. And the guy says, we got time for one more. And this lady gets on, and she says, Colonel, I am so glad that I got to talk to you and tell you thank you. And you did something to take care of my brother. Her brother was Dan Bush. Yeah. And he ended up dying. But Dan should be a Medal of Honor recipient. To this day, I keep telling people that. I'm hoping that one day they're going to wake up and say...
You would think his congressperson could get this posthumously done, you would think.
You can get it done. You can. Believe me, I'm working on it.
Yeah,
okay?
I believe you.
Yeah, I'm working that one. Dan Bush deserves that. He does.
It changed your life in a lot of ways, but I mean, you always valued, from everything I've read about you, you always had a keen sense of what life was, how important it was to live each day to its fullest. I mean, the way you speak about your children, your grandchildren, the people that served under you, you took a special interest, that important interest. But how did this change you again when you come out of this? You know, you're alive, you were leading men, you lost some. What's going on inside you?
I'm not sure what the words are. It took a while for me. And I'll be honest about it, and I'm not ashamed of it. There's nights
Yeah.
that it's there.
And
I'm not ashamed of that by any means, because those were my kids. And even some of them that survived, the young kid that fell off the rope, he's alive, you know? And I have been constantly making sure he's okay.
Your commanders believe that you did the best you possibly could. They were tough people, but did you second guess yourself?
I don't know that I did, but I guess maybe if I wanted to really analyze it deeply, I might have come up with something different. But I don't know what would have been different, because they were everywhere. We were in the street, and we had to do what we had to do.
One more movie question I gotta ask. Is Sizemore's personality playing you? Is that you, or is that not who you were at that time?
That is not who I was, okay? No.
Wow.
It is not. No.
Did they allow you to consult and say, you know what, that ain't me?
I had nothing to do with the movie.
Did they come to you?
Nope. I had nothing to do with the book, Black Hawk Down. Mark Bowden wrote the book, Black Hawk Down. And his book was finished in 1998. And he knew that I had a rule. And if you ever talk to my wife, she will tell you I have lots of rules, okay?
She has lots of rules.
Yeah, she does. But my rule was that I would never talk about anything I did until I got out of uniform. Yeah. And so when Mark Bowden wrote the book, he knew that. And so the first time I talked to him was in 2003, after I retired in 2002. And he asked me, he says, we were having a nice conversation, and I had to like him. His second cousin's Bobby Bowden. Talking about a great man? That's a great man there, let me tell you. Yes, it is. But anyway, we were talking, and he says, well, what did you think of the book? I said, well, I've done a quick read on it, because I didn't read it until after I retired. And I said, I think you did a pretty good job, I really do. And I thank you for it. He says, so you don't have any problems with it? I said, I didn't say that. I said, you did a pretty good job. I think you probably got 80 to 85% of it right, and that's pretty good. And I said, but don't worry about it, because I'm going to write a book and I'll correct everything that you had wrong, okay? And he and I got along fine, absolutely fine. The movie, to answer your question, 75% accurate. Not bad, not bad. When you consider everything that was going on, that's not bad, you know. And really, Scott and Jerry Bruckheimer are pretty good at what they do as well. So I think it's okay. My input to the movie was zero, again because I was still on active duty when they were filming in Morocco. I actually found out they were filming a movie when Craig Nixon, who was with me in Somalia, and Craig called me and said, "Sir, wanted to make sure you knew I sent some guys over. They're filming the movie in Morocco." And I said, "Craig, that's great. What movie are you talking about?" I did not know.
Wow.
I didn't know until he told me. And after the movie came out, January the 18th of 2002, that Friday night, I was not going to the theater. I knew it'd be way too many people there to make me feel comfortable. And so I said, I won't go Saturday night either. And I didn't. But on Saturday morning, I got a call from my two daughters. They said, "Dad, we went and saw the movie last night." I said, "What movie?" They said, "Dad, you know what movie?" I said, "Okay, I haven't seen it though." They said, "Well, we got some questions for you." When your daughters start asking you questions, you're in trouble.
Wow.
Okay? Anyway, I went on, decided to go on Sunday because Sunday in Georgia, the pastor's either still talking or you're home eating fried chicken, butter beans, and mashed potatoes. I know that's how I grew up, okay? Somebody else, I'm sure, here grew up that way, right? But anyway, I went on Sunday because I figured that would be a little easier. And I lived in Snellville, Georgia. I went to Conyers, Georgia, about a 20-minute drive. And I went in the theater, and there was about 5 empty seats. And I said, this is not what I was hoping for. But I'm going to do it. So I sat down. I realized later when I saw the movie again that I missed a whole bunch the first time, because the first time I was going back to the reality quite often. But watched the movie, and I sat there until everybody pretty much left. There was about 7 people left. And I walked down, and I was single at the time. That's the reason I was just myself. And there was a young man over here with his wife and a young couple over here. I keep walking, and I look at the young couple over here, and the young man sees me, stands up. He walks over to the aisle, and he and I embraced and cried. In the movie, there's a young man that got his thumb almost shot off, Sergeant Scott Galentine. He watched the movie 200 feet from me. He lived in Covington, Georgia, 20 minutes the other side of the theater. God has a plan, and that plan was for Scott and I that day.
Knowing how you felt, and it's in the book, how difficult was it for you to hold your tongue about the decisions made by the president at that time, knowing military may not criticize the commander-in-chief? How hard was that, knowing what you just went through?
Never thought anything about it while we were there. You just block it out.
Yeah.
You can't let that get in your way. But we ended up going to the White House for Veterans Day after we got back from Somalia. I can tell you, if you ever get an invite, you can't say no. Okay, I tried. I didn't want to go.
Wow.
I didn't think it was where I needed to be. But I went because I was told I was going. And I had myself and Captain Mike Steele, my company commander, his first sergeant, and 5 of my soldiers. And we were in one of those big rooms in the White House. And I never forget the funny part of that was 2 of my soldier rangers came to me and said, "Sir, I got a problem." I said, "What did you do?" He said, "Sir, we didn't do anything, but we can't find the Krispy Kreme donuts." I said, "Boys, this is the White House, okay? They don't have Krispy Kreme donuts." And that's the boys, so that's what they do. That's just them. And so I'm talking to this gentleman who was a World War II guy. They had World War II, Korean War, Vietnam veterans, and us all in the White House that day. I think the total was about 37 people total, so there was some of each one. And I was talking to this gentleman. It's one of the great moments in my life. And I'm talking to him and everything, and he says, "Now, you're the Ranger Battalion commander that was in Mogadishu, right?" I said, "Yes, sir." And we talk a little bit. And he says, "See that gentleman over there? Little bitty guy, maybe 5'7", and 5'8", I don't know. And he says, "You might want to go talk to him." I said, "Why?" He said, "He was a Ranger on D-Day." That told me something very quickly, because I know what the Rangers did on D-Day. They were at Point de Hoc. So I went over to him and introduced myself, and we started talking. I did more talking than he did. He just didn't say much. And we got to a point, and I said, "Well, sir, I told that you went ashore on D-Day." He goes, "Yep." That's all he said. And I said, and you were one of the Rangers that were trained to scale the cliff at Point de Hoc? He goes, yep. I said, did you scale the cliff at Point de Hoc? He says, yep. Wow. And I said, you're a legend. You're not just a hero, you're a legendary hero. And I said, you set a standard for every one of us that have ever been Rangers to live up to. Everybody should take you and understand that. And I said, you are a hero. He looked at me and said, son, I appreciate you saying that. He said, but I'm not the hero. My buddies on my right and left that died that allowed me to make it to the top of Point de Hoc, they're the heroes. And he's right. He's exactly right. And so that was my take with him that day. That was a great part. Everything after that wasn't very good in the White House. Because when I stood in front of President Clinton, he didn't have a clue who I was. I had to introduce, and I had a name tag on. I guess he can't read. I don't know. Anyway. And then we go into the next room and the president spoke. The one thing I always will say about President Clinton, he's the finest speaker I've ever heard because he spoke to all four groups separately what he said to them because we were separate people. And he was superb. Go in the Oval Office, and he was signing things like Les Aspin was there. And not my favorite guy, nice guy, but not real good at being a Secretary of Defense. Not real good. So anyway, we're told the president's going to sit down, and General Shalikashvili had just become the chairman since General Powell had gone. And the president and General Shalikashvili sit sort of like we are right now, and the fireplace was behind them. And the president started asking questions. His third question was, what do y'all think about us working with the United Nations?
Wow. Wow.
I had an answer. I had a question. And the reason I wanted to answer that was because one night near us, there was a firefight going on. My guys weren't involved, but it was one of those things that didn't sound right, and a lot of people in this room will understand it. There was firing and shooting from only one direction. It was not back and forth, and you can always tell the difference. And I sent 6 of my guys up there to see what was going on. The 3 UN soldiers, what country is immaterial, most of them are worthless, okay? They were not shooting back at the bad guys. But they couldn't shoot back because they had guns with no ammo. My guys, they didn't call me and ask what to do. They knew what to do. The next morning, we had 7 dead bodies out there because my guys can shoot. I told the president when he asked, can we work with the United Nations? That was my explanation to him. He turned to General Shalikashvili and said, do you think that really happened over there? All of my guys says, Colonel's going to get killed because he's going to go slap the president, and the Secret Service guys are going to shoot him,
Yeah.
Yeah, that happened. That is precisely what happened. So do I have any kind of support or whatever you want to call it for President Bill Clinton? No, I can never do that because he questioned my integrity, and that doesn't go well.
Your father once told you, you don't know if you're going to be a leader, you learn how to be a leader. What was the context in which that was said? Do you recall?
Well, I think it was really when my dad focused on the fact of sports because he was a strong believer in sports because he thinks it teaches you how to be part of a team. And he said that sometimes somebody has to take charge and be a leader. And that's where my dad got me on that one right there.
You've had your criticism of President Clinton, but you also dislike the media in general. Did you feel that they did not portray the Army and the military in the right context during the conflicts?
I think they could have done a much better job of telling the truth. That's what I think. And that's the reason I've chosen to tell the truth in that book that I wrote. Mark Bowden did a great job, but I wanted people to know the truth about some things that were never ever brought out otherwise. And the truth is important because the people that know whether it was true or not are the soldiers. And that's the ones that need to know that what the truth is, and they know.
I went to the Philadelphia Inquirer to find out who's still around. You know, all of the different people that served under your leadership and where they ended up going. Do you talk on a regular basis with any of them?
I talk to a whole lot of them. Probably a great example is the young man that fell off the rope, Todd Blackburn. Todd was seriously injured, as you know. And the decision that day to put him in that vehicle and 2 other vehicles, of which Sergeant Dominic Peely was killed during that movement to get Todd back there, General Garrison never questioned me making the decision to send those vehicles back. I called him and said, "Sir, I'm sending 3 vehicles back." And all he said was, "Roger that, we'll put a little bird to give you cover." Todd Blackburn, I don't know how he lived. He fell 60 feet. So I don't know how he lived, but he did. He's had a lot of struggles. Physically, he's just back. He's pretty good now, but he struggled for a long time. PTSD, you can only imagine, because not only did he die, he knows Sergeant Peely got killed getting him out, and those things are all part of that. So I stay in touch with him probably more than some of them want me to.
Some of the credo of Colonel McKnight, if you go to his website, which is DannyMcKnight.com, it's the soldier, not the reporter, who has given us the freedom of the press. It's the soldier, not the poet, who has given us the freedom of speech. It's the soldier, not the politicians, that ensure our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's the soldier who salutes the flag, who serves beneath the flag, and whose coffin is draped by the flag. Well said, sir.
I believe it.
We thought it was appropriate to ask for your opinion on something. We have just had an incident with Syria. It happened Friday night, a pinpoint attack to take out chemical weapons facilities in Syria. There's a mixed opinion from the American people. A lot of people support this. We have not sent ground troops to Syria. A calculated risk, but a successful mission. What's your thought on this move that was done by and ordered by the President as Commander-in-Chief?
Well, we have to remember that he'd already done it once, and he did that fairly politely. I think he was trying to be polite to say, look, this is unacceptable, and he did something. What I have seen now, and these people that say, well, that's not for real, it's very real. And to see those children, more than anybody else, to see those children having to deal with that is absolutely unacceptable in any form you think of it is unacceptable. I totally think he did the right thing. And we had 2 other countries that stepped up too. So I don't want people need to remember, it's not just us. We've got the French and the British now. They're there. They're doing it too. And that's what we have to do, because if we don't do it, Assad will keep doing it. And so we'll see what happens. We really will. I think it was the right thing to do. And that was actually supposed to be on a radio show in the morning about that. But the stupid girl that gave me the phone number forgot the last 4 numbers.
We took phone calls on this afternoon on WNDB. We seldom do this. Show of hands, how many people think the President did the right thing with Syria this weekend? Respectfully, how many people thought the President did the wrong thing this weekend? Wow, it captured audience here. There's another issue we want to talk about, and that is school safety. That's very important to you. I watched you yesterday speak to the issue. You want a safer school district for everyone, but you're working with Sheriff Ivey in Brevard County for us to have safer schools. Tell us about what's going on.
I've long felt that we didn't have the right kind of security for our kids in school. We have 82 schools in Brevard County. We had 32 school resource officers. I want somebody to explain to me how that can work. It can't work. And they'll say, well, we have an elementary school here and a middle school here, so he does one day and one the other. You know, the bad guy is not stupid. He'll figure that out, okay? So I'm a strong believer that we have got to do something about it. I've spent time already with 3 high schools, and I am sort of the person they're going to see what we have to do. And there's so many things that are simple. They're maybe not pretty, but do we want to worry about the school looking pretty, or do we want our kids to be alive and go to school like we did? And I'm really concerned that they're not, and Sheriff Ivey and I just talked about it at Tycho Airport recently when we were both there at the show. And, you know, he just, the other day, called off what he was doing because he was getting no support. And I think he's doing that to try and get their attention. We have got to do something to take care of our kids and our grandkids, folks, and you all know that. And we can't do it by not doing anything. And the school board, I stood in front of the school board. Remember when Wayne Ivey and the superintendent talked?
Yes.
The next night was the school board meeting. I got to talk, whether they liked it or not, because we need to get serious about this.
Do you want fortifications within the schools, Colonel?
I don't need fortifications. I need fences, though, and I need cameras, and I need, you know,
And
things
SRO
that are
officers,
simple,
too.
simple things. You know, they talk about backpacks. You know, you go to a football game these days, you have to have a clear little bag, don't you, to get in? And that's required.
Even at
Why
the
can't we
Speedway.
do that?
Yeah.
And if they say, well, you know, my kid likes a regular backpack, I don't care what your kid likes. I want him to be alive. I want my granddaughters to be alive. I want to make sure they have the right thing. So this is a terrific battle we're facing. And we're the ones that's going to have to fix it. Nobody else is going to fix it for us. We have to do that. And I promise you, I'm so happy that Wayne Ivey and I are very close and work hard together on different things, and this is one of them now. And this has become my new mission. This is my next Mogadishu, okay?
Yeah.
That's it.
He's a top flight sheriff, so you've partnered with a really great guy.
Got it.
Would you like to see one entrance? Like, we have more secure courthouses and airports than we do schools. I've never understood that. How do you feel about single entrance, many ways to leave, but one, everybody goes through one big entrance?
Two of the schools that I'm working with, they are going to try to do exactly that. They have two now. And the other thing is, when you have an entrance, you need to have somebody there. And if you have people come through with a plastic bag and you can see what's in it, whether it's a gun or not, you know, I don't see a problem with having wands and go, that's what they do at football stadiums a lot, isn't it? Yeah.
Chicago does it.
There's a lot of things we can do, and if people are bothered, well, it won't look right. I want it to look right for my kids, your kids, to live and go to school and graduate from college. And these people are not focused on that. I'm so bothered by everything, and we're letting kids protest. Oh, come on. Why are we letting kids go out and protest? They're not going to make the decision. We have to make the decision. They got a good idea, but go to school. Don't go protest, you know? I can see me telling my dad I'm going to go protest. That would have been one time, okay?
Let's take questions from the audience. If you'll step up to the microphones, we'll go left to right. Students, please come down. Some of you are here for extra credit. We have a limited amount of time, so we want to get you in. So come right down. Don't be shy. I'm waiting for the first couple of people to come up. Come right to either microphone, general public. While we wait for the first person, let me ask you this. You have had 2 tours of being a Homeland Security either expert or advisor. Tell us about that. Who asked you to do it?
I was the first Homeland Security coordinator for Brevard County when I retired and came back home. And Bob Lay was my boss, and I did that. And then from there, I went to Brevard Junior College. Well, it wasn't then. It's what I went to, but it was Brevard Community College, and I became their Homeland Security instructor, is what I was doing. But I gave all that up for the speaking.
Very good. Let's take our first question. If you'll step up to the microphone. Good evening, and thank you for visiting with us tonight.
Well, good evening. My name is Ryan, and I'm a fourth-year aerospace engineer student. I'd like to know, you have specifically been to, at least service-wise, Panama and Somalia. I'm curious if you have kept up with recent developments in those two countries, specifically Somalia, where, if I recall, they've got a transitional government built for maybe 20-something years. What is it, 2014, if I remember?
Have you followed the changes, Colonel, that have gone on in Somalia since you were there?
Since I was there, they haven't changed very much. They still got their fighting going on. They had a president that came in, and he sort of disappeared. They don't really have the idea of what a government is about, in all honesty. They did for a long time ago. They did. They had a good country. And I met a young lady that was from there. I was doing the Larry King show, and she was getting ready to fix my hair. Isn't that silly? and she was a lovely young lady, and I said, well, where are you from? And she says, from Somalia. And I thought, she's got scissors at my head right now, and she's from Somalia. And that's the truth. But she was a very nice young lady. And we talked about just exactly what you're talking about, and that is, do you think that my country will ever, ever recover? And I said, I don't think so. There's too many bad pieces to it, more than good pieces.
Let's come over here. Your question now for Colonel McKnight.
Good evening, Colonel. Thank you for your service and thank you for speaking tonight. My name is Jonathan Farrell. I'm a first-year Homeland Security student here at Embry-Riddle, and I asked this question both for myself and for all of the ROTC cadets and future leaders of America. What problems do you anticipate the future leaders of America, both on and off the battlefield, what problems do you anticipate the next generation facing, and what advice do you have to offer for them?
Advice for those that are coming up now?
Yes, sir.
Well, the leader part of it is sort of what I've already said. If you want to be a leader, work hard at it, learn how to lead, and you'll learn by other people around you that have already been there. And that's what I think young people need to do is, where do you pick out that one person that you want to be your mentor, you know? And that's a big deal. It really is. So I think they have to look from a leadership perspective at something that simple. What do I think they need to do for the future? Well, I already admire every one of them that are choosing to go and do what they're going to do, whether it's in the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, or the Coast Guard. It doesn't matter to me. I admire every one of them that are making that choice today, and I applaud them. And I think they're setting the right example that others are going to follow too. If we keep doing that, we will continue to be the greatest fighting force on the face of the earth as we are today.
Over here now, your question for
Thank you,
Colonel
sir.
McKnight, and other opportunities if you want to step up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Colonel. Thank you for your service. And I'm a local high school teacher, and I have students who are serving around the world that have been my students. I've seen them. They've come back to visit, and some now are going to serve in the future. What advice do you have for us local high school teachers to teach about, I teach world history, and about the cultures and people around the world? Is there any advice you have to improve what we do?
Love it. I have a grandson that when he was in the 7th grade, and he was at my house, I said to him, I said, what kind of history are they teaching you these days? What do they teach you about the Civil War? He says, they don't teach us about the Civil War. That was a bad thing. They don't teach it. And I said, oh, okay. What do you know about World War II? Well, we did get one day to learn about World War II. How can we be teaching our kids about the future if we don't teach them about the past? And it stunned me. And it's not that my grandson's stupid, he's not. It's just not being taught. And I think one of the biggest failures in teaching is in history, because we need to let them know what history is that got us to where we are today. And we seem to have forgotten that. And I had a great history teacher, my father. And I mean that. He loved it. And I learned from him what our country is all about. We've got to do a better job. And it's not the teacher's faults. because they tell you what to teach. And see, I'd be the worst teacher in the world because they tell me what to teach. I'd say, okay, and then teach what I want to. I mean, I really mean that. I applaud teachers. I have a son-in-law that's an assistant principal at Space Coast High School. And he tells me, in all honesty, I'll be honest, we drink a beer or two together sometimes, and some of the things he tells me that he has to deal with drives me crazy, And so I think it's one of the toughest things in the world today is what our teachers have to deal with. And every teacher, if you're in here, thank you for what you do. Past, present, and future.
You want to move that microphone so everybody doesn't have to bend over. That way you'll be at normal height. Go ahead.
Should be fine. Evening, Colonel. My name's Linus Wong. I'm a senior and actually pursuing a Bachelor of Science in Meteorology. I have two questions. The first one's a little more personal. How did you receive your commission?
How did what?
How did you receive your commission as an officer, sir?
I explained this to somebody a little earlier, one-on-one. I did something that hadn't been done before. That's me. I went to 2 years at Brevard Junior College. Then I went to Tallahassee, to Florida State, to finish my last 2 years. I'd played some baseball and thought I was going to be able to continue to do that. That didn't work out. So I go to Tallahassee, and I don't have a clue what I'm going to study. I picked business management. That's still what it says my major is. I don't know what I ever did in business management, but that's what it is. But I saw the pamphlets there about Army ROTC. I picked one up. I went home, looked at it. Wife looked at it. I went back to the ROTC building the next day. And that ROTC at Florida State was Army, Air Force, and Army, Air Force, and Navy, all three in that one. And I said, actually they had two. I said, I'd like to see about going maybe through the ROTC program. And Major Crump was talking to me. I'll never forget Major Crump because he was missing his trigger finger. He got it shot off in Vietnam. It's always in my mind forever, So anyway, I'm talking to, and he says to me, he says, well, as an incoming freshman, I said, whoa, I'm not an incoming freshman. He said, you're not? I said, no, I've already got a 2-year degree. I'm a junior. He said, well, that's a problem. I said, what's the problem? He says, to be an incoming junior in ROTC, you have to have taken freshman and sophomore year. You can't do that. I said, nope. He said, the only other way you can do it is an 8-week camp. I said, I'll do that. He said, no, you won't. It ended last week. This became a challenge for me, okay? So he said, let me talk to some people and we'll see what we can come up with and come back and see me tomorrow. I went back the next day. He said, this is what we've come up with. The first thing is we're asking you to do something that's never been done before. I said, I love it. He said, it's probably illegal. I said, okay, let's go. I took 4 years of ROTC in 2. I did freshman and sophomore year together my junior year, and I did junior and senior together my senior year, which was pretty challenging. And then I had to go to that 8-week camp. And on August the 3rd of 1973, I stood up and I raised my right hand. And I swore to protect the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, so help me God. That's how I started.
Thank you, sir. And
You had a second question, sir.
yes, sir, I did. As a former ROTC cadet, and even now, I'm still struggling to reconcile. There's one question that's always been in the back of my mind. As a leader fresh out of I guess a designated leader fresh out of college, how does a new second lieutenant step into the role of a leader and take charge of a squadron or a company, despite the fact that he or she has zero experience in the field, and yet you have NCOs under you that have multiple deployments under their belt and they know what they're doing?
How does a second lieutenant step into a position of leadership when he has little to no experience, yet those under him have more experience? I'm trying to boil this down. Was that
yes,
close?
sir.
That was close. Where you go, Colonel?
That is a tremendously good question, and I really mean that. The smart people like yourself are going to go to those NCOs, and you're going to learn from them. because you don't have a clue. When you start, you really don't. So, you know, that's what you have to do, is learn from them. Then you will make the transition to where you get to the level where then they're looking up to you, okay? I went through my basic course, jump school, ranger school. That was my first 6 months in the Army. When I finished ranger school and I go back to Fort Benning for my first assignment, they tell me, well, we've changed your assignment, but it's still a Fort Benning assignment. I said, okay, no problem. What is it? You're going back to Dahlonega, Georgia. You're going to be the company executive officer. Dahlonega, Georgia is one of the coldest places on the face of God's earth. I had been frostbitten in Dahlonega and missed 5 hours of training because of that, okay? But I was up there, a young second lieutenant, sergeants first class, master sergeants. They had been in Vietnam more than once. There was a major by the name of Bob Howard, Medal of Honor recipient. Put in for a Medal of Honor 3 times. I learned by keeping my mouth shut and my eyes and ears open by being around those people. You are right on the money. That's the way you have to do it. Your time will come and you'll say, I've got it. Don't rush it. Make sure you do it slow and easy and learn from like these non-commissioned officers sitting here. That was a great question.
All right.
Good luck to you.
All right.
Good luck to you.
Thank you, sir.
How do you best demonstrate integrity?
Just always do the right thing. There's the hard right or the easy wrong. Do the hard right, your integrity will always be perfect. It's that simple.
Doctor, your question now.
My name is JT Shim, and I've been teaching, and I've got a kid that I wanted to bring here. He was 17 years old. He wants to go to West Point, and at 17, he's already bemoaning that we don't have enough military historians. I'm like, wow, how does he have that type of insight? So one of the questions I have for you is about Vietnam, Powell Doctrine, overwhelming force. Haven't we learned any lessons from that? Why do we keep cutting forces when we go to Iraq, we go to Mogadishu, etc.? And my second question is about the CMH.
Hold on, let's do the first one
first question is about teaching it.
No, my question is
reduction in force.
Why do we try to pussyfoot in there with insufficient forces?
Like you dealt with in Somalia where they cut you by 100.
Because there are just times that idiots are making decisions and we have to deal with that. I mean, that's that simple. Because in the things you just named, think about who was in charge in some of those times. And when you look at it, you'll say, they weren't making the right decisions.
Okay, so it's that obvious.
Yes,
I'm not
is to me.
overthinking it.
Yeah.
All right. Your follow-up, Doctor.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Follow-up was the Congressional Medal of Honor. Tell me about that political process to try to get that to happen. And by the way, I'm willing to help you.
How do you get the Congressional Medal of Honor? What's the process? You have to be sponsored, or what happens?
Well, you're talking about Dan Bush, who I am strongly trying to find a way for that to happen. I haven't got the answer for it yet, but I know that I'll get help from you because we'll do that. It's just bothered me since 1993.
Do you know who his congressman is, out of curiosity? I think we all should gang up on that person.
I don't know.
Honestly, because I think it starts in the district.
Well, General Garrison tried, and General Garrison didn't win that battle either. And General Garrison, again, one of the greatest leaders I've ever been privileged to work for.
The good doctor and I have a couple of ideas. We're going to conference with you.
And General Garrison, he never got another star after Somalia. He was a fall guy. There were 2 fall guys, him and me. I was the other one. And you know what? I'm okay with that because I wouldn't be here with you otherwise. And I'm fine with that, believe me.
We'll put a book note on that.
Yes.
And your question, good evening.
Good evening, sir. My name is Benjamin, 3rd class Salvato, and I was wondering on what you think the future of the war in Syria will look like, whether you think that there's an end in sight or if you think there will be escalated armed conflict.
Do you see ground forces coming to Syria? Will it be escalated? Or do you think that we've nipped it in the bud for now?
I'm hoping that what the president and the French and the Brits did, I hope that that's going to make that better. But I don't really have, I said I hope, because I'm just not sure that Assad is smart enough to back away. And if push comes to shove, for one thing, we got more firepower. I know that for a fact. I think everybody knows we have more firepower. But I've always said the way you're going to finally close something out is when you're looking the bad guy dead in the eyes and you kill him. That's the way we'll have to end up doing it. So yes, I think for it to go away, I mean, look, we've made progress in a lot of places. We really have. We changed Iraq more than they would have ever had a chance without us. We've made a difference in Afghanistan. It's not perfect, but we have made a difference. So we have to be prepared now to look the bad guy right between the eyes and finish it.
Here's a question that doesn't come up too often at the salad bar. How often under your command did you come across a weapon and say, this is Chinese, this is Russian? How'd they get that? Did you ever see anything where either your people or you knew that this came from the Russians or the Chinese?
I can't say that I've seen any from the Chinese, but I have seen Russian, yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it in Somalia?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
That's what the Somalis were getting, that, and they loved RPGs. You know where they got those? From the Italians.
From the Italians?
Somalia was an Italian colony.
Oh yeah, under Selassie, right?
Yeah, they were an Italian colony.
Wow.
And we found out that RPGs were coming in somehow. We found the Italian checkpoint that was letting them in.
Long reach.
You can't trust the bad guys. It's that simple, you know? You just can't. You got to do it yourself.
Does it feel like you were fighting a mob at that time?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know.
Good evening, sir. Your question for Colonel McKnight. Okay. Go ahead.
Good evening, sir. Mon Russell, first year aeronautics student. So while I didn't personally go, you spoke earlier about the gun violence in school, and I'm from Broward County where the Parkland shooting took place. While I didn't personally go to the school, I lived like 10 minutes away, and I had a lot of friends there, and I've been on the campus multiple times. And one of the solutions, or something that we were looking at, or that I think is a good option, I want to see what your opinion is on it. What is your opinion on, instead of having a school resource officer, because there's a number of factors that go into having police officers on school campuses, what is your opinion on having veterans as the security guards? Because I see a lot of security guards. My school personally had 2 at one point, and we had over 2,000 students. Those veterans, we have a lot of veterans that are homeless anyway, and be able to give them those jobs, and they have the training, and with the proper making sure that they know what the school is expecting. What is your opinion on that as a solution to this problem?
That is one of the number one things I have said that we need to do. And we have to make sure, though, and there's a lot of veterans sitting here, and I don't think they'll disagree with this. Every veteran isn't ready for that, because some of them, there are veterans. There's young and old, and sometimes they haven't gotten rid of that bad thing that happened to them. So we have to be selective, but I am absolutely 100% a believer that we've got veterans that can take care of our kids in school, without a doubt. And that, I think, is what Sheriff Ivey is going to probably use as the next thing that we go after. Thank you. And thank you for Park Hill. Thank you.
Good evening, sir. I'm Mitchum, 4th class doer. I'm a first-year aerospace engineering student here. I wanted to backtrack and focus on the effect that the second helicopter crash had on your unit's morale. And as the officer, how did you help your people combat that devastating strike to your unit's morale?
Well, it was a pretty awful thing. It really was. We knew that we could get a helicopter shot down. The first one, we understood that. It just happened. You don't want it to happen, but it did. The second one was shot down, again, purely happenstance, it just did, and it was unfortunate. Mike Durant, thank God for him that he's still alive with us, you know. We lost the other guys. The thing that's most powerful about that second helicopter going down was what Randy Shugart and Gary Gordon did, because the movie is very accurate with that. They did ask to go. They asked more than once, and they were finally given the word it was their call, and they went. And what happened to them was awful. And it's something that's, it's a tough one for me, because Gary Gordon and I had never served together. But over there, we became two of the closest friends ever that either one of us had had, I think. I know it did for me. And it really, really was hard. And I remember when we did come back, and I met his wife, Carmen, and I met his son, who was 5 at the time. His daughter was 2 at the time. And it was just something that became very important to me, and especially getting to know them. And I met a young man when 3rd Ranger Battalion was celebrating its historical 20th year of coming back in the Army after it was redone and brought back in 1984. And I knew there was a young man there when I drove all the way from here up to Fort Benning. And I got out of the car. This young captain walks over to me and says, "Sir, I'm your escort officer." I said, "Well, I know my way around 3rd Battalion pretty well, but you can escort my wife, okay?" And I said, "There's a young man I want you to bring to me when the ceremonies is over." He said, "Yes, sir." Ceremony was over, and I see him coming to me with this young man that I wanted to see. This young man stands in front of me, and I was looking at Private First Class Ian Gordon. Gary's son wanted to follow his dad. And he only talked to me about 45, 50 seconds, because young Rangers don't like old Ranger Battalion commanders. Okay. So later that day, they were having family day, and I was talking to some of my guys. Somebody walked up behind me, and I sort of looked down. I couldn't tell who it was. And when I finished talking to my guys, I turned around, and it was Ian Gordon. And Ian said to me, he said, "Sir," he says, you know, I asked him a few questions, and he says, "Well, can I ask you something?" I said, "Sure." He says, "I understand that you and my father spent a lot of time together over there." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I learned a whole lot from your father." He said, "Well, I'm sure he learned a lot from you." I said, "No, yeah, I learned more from him." He said, "Can you tell me about my dad?" That's what makes our soldiers so special, because you never forget, and you always want to make it better. That's what Ian Gordon is doing right now. He will be a Delta Force operator in the next year, because he's going to follow his dad's footsteps. That's what we need. Young men and young women like y'all, like Ian, that are going to make a difference in our country. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
We've got time for a couple more questions. I wanted to make sure the audience knew this. In watching you on video, whether you were trying to inspire realtors or whether you were talking to another private industry, there's a common thread through all of your talks, and that is about interaction. You tell, whether it's realtors or service personnel leadership, get out there with the troops, talk to them, make appearances, be seen, be visible. Is that sometimes a common failure of people in leadership? They forget to get out there with the troops?
Yeah, they like to sit in the office.
You say never sit in the office.
They want to sit in the office and just tell people to go do stuff, but they never get out there. the last place I wanted to be every day was in my office. I wanted to be out there. And it was the greatest part of my opportunity to lead was that.
Back over here, sir, your question.
Thank you for your service. And as a veteran, I think that talking with this young lady, she brought out an important segue here that we should never forget. I am tired of our leadership in Washington marginalizing our veterans. I'm especially upset as someone who spent 27 years in the Department of Veterans Affairs, had the pleasure of working with POWs. To hear someone like Senator McCain marginalized for his efforts in Vietnam is totally inexcusable. He has surrounded himself with a number of outstanding members of the armed forces, yet does not heed their advice. Does not heed their advice. And I am just, I'm beside myself after listening to what you've done. We don't have any way of repaying men like you or Senator McCain. We have no way. And I don't know how I can sit there and watch the news and tolerate what is going on. And I would just like your reaction to how general officers and field officers are marginalized by our president. Thank you.
Do they feel marginalized, by the way? Thank you for making that point, sir.
I think that's probably a pretty good statement that he made there. I really do. But we shouldn't be doing that. We should not be doing that. And he's 100% right. And
I think the American people are behind you, though.
Yeah.
The American people are.
I believe, and I hope this is going to be right, we've got a new director now of Veterans Affairs. He's a man in uniform, too. And he also understands when people are fighting things physically, mentally, because he's a doctor. I think we finally got something right that we needed to do a long time ago. I can't, in all honesty, General Shinseki, I thought was treated unfairly. He was not a problem with VA. Everybody since him has been a problem. They've been pretty worthless. But I look at what we've done, and I am hoping that we are right, that this guy who wears a uniform in the military and has served already a president, I'm hoping he's going to change the things for VA. I will be honest with you, I have never been in the VA hospital to be attended to, never. People say, why? I said, because there's another veteran out there that needs it more than I do. And I have never done it. I have been in VA hospitals, and I've never, ever walked away from one and said, oh, that was fun, because it's not, and you're right, and I agree with you. We have got to do better for our veterans. I'm 67 years old, and I'm a veteran. I don't need anything, but there are veterans out there that I need to help. And I'm blessed to get to do that because in Brevard County, we have a Veterans Memorial Center there now. It's an amazing thing. And it's about veterans, though. And I see veterans in there enjoying working in that Veterans Memorial Center. It makes them feel good. That's what we got to find a way to do. But we haven't got there yet. But if you and I keep telling them, we'll get it there somehow, won't we? And we have to. We have to. We need more opportunities like we have right here tonight, because some of the greatest things have been said by people like you and him and others here. We can make a difference. And I will tell you the one thing that I can never do, though, because people have asked me, when are you going to run for public office? I said, right after I die, okay? And my wife said right after she divorced me, okay? So, but we have got to make a difference. And I am totally in agreement with exactly what you've said about how we are not taking care of our veterans.
You mentioned Les Aspin earlier, and you didn't care too much for him. Was there a defense secretary you liked, you thought was particularly adept? Rumsfeld? Anybody that you liked? Pretty well sums it up, doesn't it?
Not a whole lot.
Yeah.
You know, not a whole lot. I'll be honest with you, there is one. The one that's in the Secretary of Defense seat today, General Mattis.
Yeah.
He's not kind and gentle. He's telling it what he thinks is right. And there's one thing about the president. He is letting him say it and he's letting him do it. And that's what the president should do. Let him do it.
I want to thank some people who helped make this our most successful series. This is our 9th year as we come to a close for the spring. Tony Petro and Bob Score and David Massey for your good work to make all of this happen. And Tony Petro in control who made this happen. And I want to especially thank Colonel Todd Mitchell and the United States Army for their friendship and reaching out to us as well to extend this opportunity to talk with Colonel McKnight. We could not have had this great opportunity without your leadership. Colonel, thank you, and good luck in your new assignment as well. Ladies and gentlemen, this is concluding our program tonight. There will be a book signing immediately following these words, and so you can purchase your book, get the Colonel to sign it, and then we hope you have a pleasant good evening, a great summer, and we'll see you back here September 10th. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, a warm thank you to Colonel McKnight. Good job.